Hello and welcome to the Rabyd Atheist. I'm Ed Raby, your host, a former pastor turned atheist, now compassionate anti-theist. We're gonna today. Let's see what's on the agenda. Today is talking about is morality possible without a God, and then I also want to address the question of I just want to make some comments about the current political landscape. I don't find it very interesting right now. It's pretty typical. So in the United States, I'm just going to give a few updates on that and just some thoughts on a couple of things. And then I want to actually spend a good chunk of the time dealing with comments because a lot of the comments have to do with the moral question this week. It was very interesting. So it was, the moment I started talking about Frank Turek and his God who is evil and dealing with the God that hardens people's heart, right? And then yes, there are no toys today, Fred. It's a live stream, so I don't do the stuff there. But the moment I talk about the moral question, it is the favorite toy of the theist right now. It's every time every apologetic channel seems to have it. There, you forgive me. Okay, thanks. Um, but it really has become the whole moral question has become like the favorite toy of the apologists these days, and it's because I think apologetics has gotten to this point where they know that all they really have is the emotional appeal anymore, and so the moral argument, in my opinion, now has become their favorite toy, and talking about morality has become their favorite toy in a large way because it's easy to emotionally appeal on it. It's easy to say, oh, you can't have morality without a God. And, when I launched my series, Morality Without God, last week, it's not a lot of fanfare there, but mostly as the series goes on, I am fairly certain the theists will come out thick because I'm planning on titling these pretty provocatively. Because one of the things that I get so tired of is being accused of not having an immoral simply because I don't believe in a God. And I think a lot of us atheists get very weary with that accusation. And as I said yesterday in my video, you can't say that atheists or secularists do not have a morality without God. You may disagree with that morality, but you can't say we don't have one. And, the thing about it is it goes a whole multitude of different directions. So the question comes, can we be moral without a God? And I think the answer is, of course, yes. But demonstrating that, making the claim, yes, I can be moral without a God, but um, proving it, okay, to a world that has been indoctrinated with this whole idea of you have to have a God to be moral. Now, the first question that comes up for me, and something that I'm going to address in the series, yeah, exactly, Fred. We are moral without God. I think morality is it exists because we are a human social species and therefore morality exists. It's a necessity. It's something that it evolved with us. As we evolved as human beings, morality has evolved as well. And that kind of explains the subjective nature of it, the changing nature of it, which I think is positive. I think the ability to change morality is actually a positive because you can realize, oh, this is causing a lot of harm, and so let's not do that anymore. I think slavery is a good example of that it actually harms society very much and human society very much. And as we realized that, we threw it off. We got rid of it, and or for the most part. And that's kind of where the whole moral question came from. But my first thing is I've now have to ask as an atheist when I look at somebody saying, "Oh, you got to have a God to be moral." My first question is which one? Okay, which one is giving the law here? Which one is giving us the morality? I think Euthyphro's dilemma kind of kicked in, um, you know, kicked in that thing too. It's like for me, that was one of the first times in my life that I really said, okay, that is a really damn good question. Are things moral because God says so, or does God simply recognize the morality of something? And it it became the real problem for me personally, when I was a Christian, is the realization that God being in the equation made that very subjective, because I had to prove that my God was true to even have a basis for morality in the first place. And it's why I've said the moral argument kind of begs the question, and still does to me. So it was. So the question gets a little bit deeper after that. Okay, well, if morality is just is, and the question of objective morality always dogged me as a theist, because is it all that objective? If it's objective, then does it need God? Became the question. If there was an objective morality, which I don't think there is, it wouldn't need a God, because it would sit there like a chair in the middle of the room without being connected to anything. uh, I'm not really sure that does us all that much good, though. And that's why after a while, I kept looking for objective morality, but I could never find it, because nobody can agree on what it is. And the non-agreement kind of made everything subjective to me. Um, so can we be moral without a God? I think so. I think standards of morality have been created already that don't have anything to do with God. I think the concept of rights, a lot of theists want to say that, all the rights and laws that are all based on the laws of Moses and all this other stuff. And I'm like, I challenge you to find human rights in the Torah. I really challenge you to find human rights in the Torah. Um, okay. I think because the more you look at the Torah, the more you look at the law, the more you realize it's more about the rights of God over people, and it has very little to do with making human rights. I've never seen, the more I tried to preach that way of making the Enlightenment, okay, um, make sense with the Bible, it never made sense. And then so, like, the Constitution of the United States didn't make sense. The Declaration of Independence didn't make sense in the light of the Bible. Yeah, felicity by nature. Objective morality now seriously confuses me. Um, it can't be objective if it comes from any God, and if it is objective, then everybody would agree to it. Everybody would think, we wouldn't have any disagreement, because it would be there. It would just be there, sitting there, and we'd all agree to it. And it would be the chair in the room, okay, that just sits there by itself, and nobody knows who built it. It would just be. And that's the problem with the whole idea of objective morality, is you can't have it connected to any personage, and that includes God's. Yeah, exactly. We would, all these moral questions and social problems that we have would have a clear answer based on that objective morality. And none of that stuff has a clear answer. None of it has a good answer. And I have come to the conclusion that I don't think objective morality only exists as a concept in the human mind. And the only use I can really find for it is kind of, what is the ideal morality, but that's not even the same as what the objective morality is. So I don't know. I've kind of given up on the whole idea of objective morality. So I've kind of like, it's somebody make it make sense. Okay. Somebody, yeah. Yeah. um, but that's kind of the issue. For me, then the subjective nature of morality comes forward, and okay, what are we aiming for? What's the goal? What's the desire? And you can have subjective goals and come up with objective rules, but that's not the same as objective morality. It just doesn't make any sense to me. Subjective desires can lead to objective rules. Like, I don't want to be killed. Most of the rest of the people I know don't want to be killed. So we create rules against murder. We all acquire our stuff and we don't want people to take it away from us. So we create rules. Hey, don't steal people's stuff. It's not, yeah, I mean, and then when you look at justice out of a moral system, that's another question. Steve makes a very good point about tormenting people for eternity is not moral. Okay, we come up with this idea of what punishment should fit the crime, but look at how subjective that is and how much that has changed over the centuries. Okay, it's like there's hi native. There's this constant continual thing that human beings do trying to figure out what the punishment should be for every crime, and that is very subjective. So it's this kind of continual thing that we do, morality. And I think that's actually very beneficial now. I remember when I was a theist, I felt all the moral questions were done and that there was a certain answer for everything. And then, of course, study of the Bible will make you realize that that's not true, because God doesn't even seem to have any objective morals. And he kind of changes the rules as he goes on. And so it's, to me, is the question even a valid question? Is morality possible without God? I think we already do morality without God. Okay. I think that's kind of the way it is. And people just have a problem addressing and acknowledging that. And so, as I do this series in the future, part of it is, the first part of it is I don't think we need God in the equation, or I think he has to justify his existence first before we put him in the equation, kind of thing. And then answering the question, okay, what is morality without God then? What does that look like? Yeah, Mike, I think I have a book on my shelf about the evolutionary development of morality based on biology. I can't remember what it is at the moment. It's somewhere. But it's the whole idea of, as we evolved as a species, morality has also evolved and continues to evolve and and of course that means there's like false directions that morality goes and good directions that morality goes, and things that work and whether it's practical and what does it do, and having good practical answers to the problem has become more my thing when I talk about morality anymore. What works. And I feel now very much as an atheist that religion was this major, it was either a false direction in evolution that works because it has social utility for some reason, or it's something that's becoming less and less necessary for morality as we grow up as a species. It's like we needed our imaginary friend to give us things at first, but the more we've grown up as a species, I don't even like using that term. Hey, Pepsico, I haven't seen you in a while. So it's like, it's become a bigger question to me than it was before. And my motivation now for answering this question of, is morality, do we need God to have morality, is because of the constant accusation against atheists that we don't have any because we don't have a God. And it's because it's so prevalent, so ingrained in our society. It's like, how do you bust that? If the quest is to normalize atheism and deconversion, how do you break that? How do you break that notion that God is so necessary for morality, because it's not just hardcore theists that have this notion. It's like a good chunk of people that believe in God. The reason they believe in God is this moral question. Uh, and it's become the favorite thing. The apologists are all over this all the time. The first thing they'll do in any debate with an atheist is kind of like, what basis for morality do you have? And there's answers to that question, but I think because of the nature of the way morality really is, it's a far more complicated answer than a theist wants to hear. And that's become the challenge. The challenge of trying to find a way to communicate succinctly and effectively, no, you're wrong. Secularists, atheists do have morality. Just because you don't have God in your worldview doesn't mean you can't have morality. Finding a succinct, quick way to show that and demonstrate that, I think, is the challenge to a lot of us atheists at this moment. And that's more my opinion on that. That's why I started a lot of this series about morality without God, because I think it is the question right now that a lot of people ask. And I think it's a deconversion issue too. So, uh, uh, you know, guys, Asho has a wrench. I know that's a scary thing to a lot of you, but he's, you know, he's a good guy. I hate to say that, but there it is. Stop reading the chat. I do read the chat because I get inspired. I have to keep talking about stuff, and talking about stuff for an hour and a half is kind of interesting. Um, I used to do it all the time, but now I don't do it as much. Much more controlled about it. Um, so that's kind of, I guess, my main interest uh, in this question is more helping people that are deconverting from it, because the first thing that family and friends often yell at us for is what. Okay, Felicia. All right, all right. Uh, I'm really working on this live streaming thing. I'm trying to get a feel for how I feel about it, doing it, and then once I have a better grasp on that, I think I'm definitely going to have some co-hosts from time to time, because me keeping it going is not always, um, you know, necessarily going to be the greatest thing. I used to be, as I get older, my creativity, I get a little bit more set in my ways, even with my creativity, unfortunately. Um, so for me, though, the moral question is more, getting back to this, it's more about deconversion, because for me personally, it was a big struggle. What do I base my morality on? I think I've settled on a couple of the systems that I'm going to talk about later in that series. And there are others besides the ones I've settled for. But I'm now, uh, so it's that deconversion issue, but it's also dealing with family and friends that kind of sit there and tell you, even if they're not like devout believers, are like, well, how do you have morality without a God? And I'm like, very easily, um, he's not really all that necessary for it. And when I get to that level, it's like they don't want to listen too much anymore, because the assumption of divinity and morality together is so ingrained in society at times. I saw it more in the South than I do up here in the North, but in the Bible Belt, it very much, God belief and morality are very much wrapped up to each other. Yeah, Blossom, I agree, because getting back to like Euthyphro's dilemma there, if God is the author of morality, any God, then it's pretty arbitrary and capricious, and you can absolutely, that God can change on a whim. Then whatever that God dictates is morally right, and if you disobey, that's morally wrong. And that's the real problem, okay, with divine command theory. And it's one of its major criticisms against it. If I take like Yahweh in the Old Testament, he seems to turn on a dime with his morality decisions. He will kill people just because he gets annoyed. Okay. And he will order people to do genocide, that kind of thing. And if you were to disobey God on an order to genocide, then you are being immoral. And that's the problem with God being in it. I think God actually creates more problems. It's just most people don't think that way, but they have to ask themselves the question, if you're dealing with morality and it's God based, then God can change morality. So is morality then all that objective if it's subject to the whims of God? And that's it's one of the most frustrating things about running an atheist channel is how people assume that God leads to objective morality. And I have to point out to them, no, that just makes it subject to their God. And they just don't want to deal with that. They don't have that concept in their head. And when you point that out for them for the first time, it's something that kind of hits them in the face. It's very slapping. Um, it's very slapping in the face to them. So, um, let's see, moving on. I'll be interested in hearing in the comments any thoughts about is morality possible without God. I'm sure all of you have some good ideas. Uh, Moving on, I did promise that I would say that I'm very glad that I was wrong about Biden. Um, uh, and what I mean by that is I really thought that he was going to stick into this thing. And now, after a few weeks of realizing he's out of it, for the first time, I'm actually more impressed with him. A lot of his career has been gas, but being very stubborn. And this is the first time I really feel like he made a thoughtful decision and said, we're going to lose if I run. And I think that shows a lot of thought on his part, or maybe just he's gotten to the point where he's realized he can't do it. And I'm glad for that because now it's actually interesting to talk about politics in America to a certain point. It's made it exciting again. Of course, this week has just been, the mudslinging back and forth. It's been fun to watch, you know. So it's been just very interesting. I don't know. Harris brings a new we have two candidates now that can be very dynamic, and Trump has had to up his dynamic game where he could be passive a little bit before. Yeah, he got stomped this week. I'll agree with that. I also note that now that Harris has been in it, even some people on all sides of the aisle have been kind of critical of her past, which is really, really necessary. Um, if you're going to have a good candidate, they should get attacked, and then you in the defense you can do a good defense and allow yourself, to have your candidate shine because they're attacked, and then you have a good defense. And I think finally we're getting to that point with all the candidates and the VP candidates where they're all getting attacked and they're all having to defend themselves. And then, of course, the big thing that gets lost for me is, and the nature of American politics where it's kind of bad, is what the hell are these people going to do? Okay. Uh, I think the problem with American politics is you have these great candidates, but then they get into office, and being a great candidate and being a great office holder are two very different things. And sometimes we elect people because of popularity, and then they don't have the ability. So we'll have to see. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. As a classical liberal libertarian, I don't know. I'm still sitting this one out. I'm going to take the George Carlin route and stay home on election day, so I can't be blamed for what happens. Um, so I can yell about all the decisions you people made. Um, I just don't feel anybody's worthy of my vote yet. So we'll see. Yeah, that's I don't know. There's not a lot. I didn't find anything religiously interesting in politics, although I've noticed that the attention given to Project 2025 has dropped off a little bit. And that's probably because Trump just disavowed it and then, took off. So it's they're still trying to throw it at him to make it stick, but I'm not sure that it's going to work as well. Um, I don't know. Yeah, the thing is, boss. Here's the thing about candidate Trump. Okay, and I'm not talking President Trump. I'm talking candidate Trump this time around. When he first ran in 2016, he was kind of this new. There was a newness to Trump, and there was this radical nature to Trump. He was an outsider. He wasn't a politician. He, you know, he had these great slogans, "Make America Great Again," and fake news and all this other crap. And this time around, he's playing the same cards, and it's like, yeah, Trump, you're just I've seen this. Um, it's like, yeah, I've seen this before, dude, and I don't know if anybody wants it. I think the amazing atheist made one a good, regardless of what you feel about the guy, he made one good observation a few months ago. Is like when Biden was still running, it's like we're running the cheeseburger versus gruel. Well, we still have the cheeseburger in Trump, but I'm not really sure what we have in Harris, but it's not gruel. It's a lot more spicy and it's a lot more new. And it has this idea of this is a new thing that we can do. And I think that's people are gravitating to that. And that's why there's a lot more excitement on the Democratic Party side. And yeah, so it's going to be interesting to see what happens. I'm trying to be very objective here, other than, I'm just trying to be a good political analyst. I mean, right now, if I look at the composite polls, uh, it's a dead heat, and even from a popularity standpoint. And but I don't know. The more I look at like the electoral college map and how that's going, it's like it's pretty close too. So this could be a close one. This could be a very close one. It really depends. We got 2 more months yet. There's a debate coming in. I think it's September 10th between the two presidential candidates. The two VP candidates are going to go at it. I think probably once, and that'll change things pretty quickly too. Always does, temporarily but quickly. We'll see. But this, at least now, I feel like I have something to talk about. Just two old white guys running, but not anymore. Um, I want to get to some of the comments this week because I did not address all of them. I don't have time anymore. Um, let's see. One of them with the nature of the comment against. There's a lot of comments that are usually against me personally, and I usually just avoid them. But one of them was like, I wonder what you were taught in seminary and Bible college. Where did you go to the right school? Did you? And it's like, did you have the right denomination teaching you? And all that ilk. And I want to address that because I don't think it matters. Yes, I'm well aware that you're responsible for most of the negative comments against me, but there you go. But in this particular case, it's kind of funny. There's a mentality behind all of them that says that somehow I couldn't get all this information and make up my own mind about it. Okay. I, why is it so hard for people to believe that you can hear something from a professor and after analyzing it for a while yourself and doing your own research and stuff and doing legit research, finding, good sources and stuff, why is it so hard for people to believe that they look back at what they were taught and go, yeah, that was kind of bullshit? Okay. Why is that? Um, why is that so hard for people to fathom? I do not understand the nature of some of the theist comments that somehow, like, I wasn't taught what everybody else was taught. If 30 people sit in a classroom, like a Christian Bible college classroom, and after they graduate, you look at them 20 years later, and 10 of them are atheists, 10 of them don't care anymore, and only 10 of them are still faithful in the ministry. Why is that so hard to believe that that would be the case, that they could be taught the same thing, but at the same time come to different conclusions about it? And there's a mentality here that I'm trying to get at. It's like, it goes along with another comment I got this week. If you really knew the Bible, you wouldn't be so critical of it. And I'm like, you haven't obviously really read the Bible that much yourself, because the more you read the Bible and the more you study it, and if you're honest about it, the more critical you can be about it. And the mentality seems to just be, if you're only taught the right thing, you would never leave. If you only experienced the right Christianity, you would never leave. If you only did all this stuff the right way, you would believe. And really, there's a lot of hubris behind that, because you're saying the reason you're still in the faith is you got all the right things. And I remember when I was being accused, well, you didn't really go to Bible college, or you didn't really go to this or that. And I'm like, hey, here's where I went to school. Call them up and see if they have graduates, with my name. And here's the year I graduated. And then I had one of my former classmates from Trinity Bible College got on and said, well, I can verify that he went to Trinity. He was a classmate of mine. And the interesting thing about his comment is he never condemned me for being an atheist, which makes me wonder about him. But he also, wasn't positive about it either. Why is it so hard to believe in religious circles that people, regardless of what stripe you learn it from, they can have questions about it and head a different direction? Christian James. Let's see. How do I put it? Being a classical liberal libertarian, people's choices are their own business. Okay. I don't know everybody's. Yeah, I would say you have a very diverse opinion group here on some of those issues. I don't get into that per se. I allow people to have diversity of political and social opinion on my channel and on my live streams. The only thing that'll get you banned is if you just go off on other people and just attack them personally. And that's been pretty clearly stated. My mods know that that's my rule. I also don't allow proselytizing, where you're just trying to, preach to us without really giving any, real rationale behind your view. I don't need that either. But my own view on those issues, well, as somebody who's neurodivergent, I can absolutely understand why neurodivergence would head people to liking the same sex, or maybe having, neurologically speaking, a different sexual framework than other people of the same sex. So trans and me and homosexual are very real possibilities given that. Abortion, I don't know. I don't have a uterus, so it's really not my business. I think if we're going to have some morality on abortion, I think the people that are getting the abortion should probably be the ones talking about it, not the other people that don't get them. They're the ones getting that medical procedure. That's their business. Okay. Although I do think that if you're going to hold men on the hook for child support and stuff like that, they should have some say in whether they want that responsibility legally. And I guess I'm all for, in order to protect the rights of fathers, to make sure they're the father. I think genetic testing for newborns should be mandated these days, so we know exactly who the father is. so you don't end up having somebody who isn't the father, somebody on the financial hook, that kind of thing. Um, so there's just, to me, I'm much more um, in a secular society. I don't think that we need to inject our religion on that, and we need to come up with better answers. It's not my business in a lot of ways as far as homosexuality and trans. I probably have the most open view of trans because if science can come up with a way to reverse sex and do that, if somebody wants to make that decision, that's their business. Okay. I don't care. I get a lot of that from, you know, looking to the future. I'm a big science fiction fan. Don't you do? I wouldn't put a lot of people out of a job. Go ahead and have your talk shows about it. I'm very much open to this stuff. I thought it was a neat idea if human beings could change their sex from a biological point of view. Wouldn't that just open up the idea of empathy if each side could spend some time as the opposite sex? You know, that was some of my initial thoughts back like a couple decades ago. You know, if a guy could actually spend some time as a woman, would he be more empathetic to women and vice versa? You know, I think that's, you know, it's something to think about. So, I don't know. The social issues, I'm very open to listening a lot and a lot, not shouting about it. Okay. Now, as for me personally, I don't know, I'm pretty heterosexual still. Um, I think I've said it before that I've had like three or four homosexual encounters, experiences myself, and I didn't get revolted at it, but it wasn't something that lights my fire. I'll just put it that girls still get me going. So just being honest, guys, not really. And so that's one of the accusations. A lot of people, yes, asshole, you're one of the few exceptions. You know, I love you, man. Um, just so you know. Um, so it's one of those things where for me it's been a struggle because when I left the faith, it's like purity culture had a lot to do with that because I was never allowed to ask questions um, about my sexuality. I mean, I was born a biological male, so therefore I must be a male. And the only option that you're given in purity culture is to find that girl that's, you know, your soulmate, the person God, you know, you know, picked for you. Okay. And so when I got out of that, I was like, you know, these are questions I have never. Okay, all right. But I had never asked those questions before. Okay. And I've only been asking them for like 8, 9 years, and only about 6 years of those years with therapy. And I'm still answering those questions. I don't know. I've gotten to the point where I allow a lot of liberty in others to make their own decisions about those things. And at the same time, I'm just trying to work it out for myself. So that's um, that's kind of, you know, so yeah, I don't know. That's kind of where I'm at personally. I'm still there. I'm still in therapy, by the way, folks. So for a lot of issues, and one of them, you know, over is trying to figure out some of these questions for myself. I've kind of gotten to a place where, you know, I'm still answering those questions. I've got a lot of questions um, still, and I'm okay with debate about it. So, but uh, I'm just very open, letting people make their own decisions about things. So I think they're adults and they should. Um, I'm just kind of there. You know, they're adults. Let them make their own decisions. So there's that question. Some of the other ones that I found interesting this week. When I started talking about morality, getting back to that, on what basis do you have good? What do you say something's good or evil? Kind of goes into all discussions, doesn't it? I think I've given the answer over the years that I think good. First of all, you need to understand I don't look at good and evil as entities anymore. There's no good it's kind of like when somebody it goes to the question of humanity too, because I get this, you know, theists will often say humanity is sinful and wicked and all this other stuff, and I'm like, I don't see that. I don't think the monitor of good or evil can be pressed upon an entire race, an entire species. I think I would rather say that there's good and evil actions that can determine somebody's character as it's developed. I think that's a better way to put it. And I'd much rather look at it individually. But I don't buy the whole good and evil being applied to the entire of humanity. I just don't do that anymore. Um, so, what do you get? Um, I think for me, good actions are ones that maximize well-being and either diminish harm or stop harm from taking place. And then evil is the opposite of that. I think. What about replicants? Uh, Paul, I'm going to tell you, I think a replicant is going to have the morality of whoever made them. So, you know, um, yeah, um, to address the comments section, if you believe the Bible, you're going to come up with a lot of different answers. That's why there's so many different denominations, because the Bible isn't all that clear about a lot of things. Um, you know, Paul injects the idea not under the law, but under grace. But at the same time, he will make a list of things under the law that are still evil. And then at the same time, turn around and advocate for slavery, which most people modern days would consider evil. But then he tells, I think it's in First Timothy, servants, obey your masters if you're obeying Christ. So there's that little contradiction and problem. Um, yeah, and as far as dealing with the Ten Commandments, I'm sure it was a great shock to people when they got to Mount Sinai, which didn't happen, by the way. There's no way that suddenly murder and stealing stuff was bad, seeing that those codes existed in laws long before the OT. So, yeah, it's just I. Here's the thing, and just something to consider for all the theists in the room, or if you watch this. I want you to notice how much your theology makes you go around in a circle, because that's what you're doing. You're chasing your tail with theology. As somebody with a master's degree in theology, it teaches you to chase your tail. So that's just something to think about. Let's see, any other comments? Of course, I had my obligatory Calvinist get on here and say that free will wasn't a defense either. I thought that was interesting. um, so, you have some theists believe in hard determinism. I know that's hard to believe, but I get it all the time. Except God gives commands on where you're to get your slaves and how you're supposed to treat them. If he had nothing to do with it, why would he give commands about it? And why would you have an endorsement by Paul in First Timothy for slaves to obey their masters if it wasn't a God thing? So, I know you want to absolve God and get, because you have better morality than the God of the Bible. You just don't realize it yet. Because you realize slavery and owning another person's wrong. but God doesn't seem to have that viewpoint. He just regulates it. Assertion without evidence that God is just and good. That's indoctrination talking. I know I used to do indoctrination as a Christian education pastor. The greatest indoctrination is God is good all the time God is good. That is absolute what you would say if you want to indoctrinate somebody when they look at the Bible. So you're a product. Okay. You're a product of that. And I wish, yeah, I feel for you. Probably everybody else is getting mad at you in the comments. I'm feeling nothing but sorrow for you because of the indoctrination being so deep. Okay. Because on the one hand, your own human morality speaks better, and then your Bible and your indoctrination and all that conflict, and there's a conflicting nature. So that's kind of the issue. And you need to, if you really want to have a positive experience in life, even as a Christian, back up and ask yourself, where do I conflict with what God says and why? And that will lead you to where I'm at. You know, I've told people I'll push you off the edge of being a Christian and into reality. What particularly, Blossom, would you be looking for in a video like that? Because I would definitely do a video on anything that is helpful. So, I mean, I look at indoctrination now as a former Christian education pastor and somebody who did ministry on a Christian education basis, even as a pastor. I now look at it for what it is. It is cult development. Okay. And I'm sorry, the mainline religions always want to say that they're different. But really they're just cults that are more accepted. But everybody indoctrinates in the religious circle. Everybody. When you teach people stuff, repeat it over and over, that is no different than when a cult does the same. This little cult over here, like, you know, the Branch Davidians or whoever, same thing. It's the same thing. It's just in bigger and largely accepted. When I did Christian education work, I was indoctrinating people. I was getting people to look past the flaws in the Bible. I was getting people to not question their faith, but reinforce it. Well, here's the thing, Christian James, prove to me that sin exists without the Bible. And I mean, the specific biblical definition of sin is it's a transgression of the law of God. You only believe in sin because the Bible told you so, but the Bible never proves sin exists. It doesn't. Okay. I got rid of that. Was the first thing that led to my ultimate downfall with Christianity, because sin, as many people have stated, is a made up problem, and Jesus is a made up solution. So, okay, I would say that Jesus did lie on a couple of occasions. He predicted his death and resurrection, and there's no proof of the resurrection. That isn't complete hearsay. I don't believe sin exists, so whether I love it or hate it or not is irrelevant. Okay. I don't buy it. Is there human suffering? Sure. Is there bad things that people do to each other? Sure. But the issue of sin is whether there's a God to give commands in the first place, and whether commands being violated is sin. That's what makes it a sin. Well, if there's no God, there's no God that gives commands, so there's no sin. I don't believe in sin. Okay, so and so there's nothing there for me to get it. I appreciate that you think I'm honest. I am. I try to be very honest with you, Theist, because I've been where you're at. Okay. I used to probably type that kind of crap in forums, like 20 years ago when I was debating these issues with atheists myself. But the more I debated them, the more I realized that they had a better point than I did. Okay. sin is the snake oil. And well, I shouldn't say sin is the imaginary problem that everybody has, and Jesus' salvation plan is the snake oil. And when I realized I was just nothing more than a snake oil salesman, that hit me pretty hard. Um, it I spent the next 3 years in a pretty funky up and down state. Whenever I got past the Bible tells me so, and I got past the what can I prove, uh, eventually I shucked it all. Uh, 2015, I was in the pulpit, and that's how I left the faith. Um, I mean, I left the faith because I realized sin was imaginary. I realized that the Bible made it up. Okay, it doesn't appear anywhere else except in religion, and I think religion makes up sin. And the more I got to that point, then I realized that Dan Barker was right, that it's a made up problem, and Jesus is a made up solution. He's the snake oil. Um, yes, yes. I think the concept of sin is dangerous, and I think it is damaging. It causes people to think they're worse than they are, and it doesn't allow you to actually deal with the real problem. I remember, for years as a Christian, I spent all this time thinking there was so much wrong with me because I was such a horrible sinner. And then, just realizing, okay, no, I'm hypersensitive, I'm autistic. Okay, never knew that before. Realizing that a lot of my issues in dealing socially were stemmed from autism and not sinfulness was a big jump. And the more you get to practical, real solutions, the better I've gotten. I still feel, and I talked about this with my therapist Wednesday, was I still feel like I'm decades behind where I should be, and I am. Okay, because I spent all this time trying to solve the problem with religion, and it didn't solve the problem, and it never will. Brainwashing, indoctrination held for a long time a desire. I had more emotional desire to keep my faith than leave it. Yeah, I mean, the sin doctrine causes people to think negatively about themselves, and it causes you to think negatively about everybody else. Um, it it has a psychological negative effect where you think you're worse than you really are, that there's no other solution but this religion, and it also causes you to view the entire human race as something. And I don't buy it anymore. Okay. I think the human race is far more complicated than to label them all good and evil. I mean, getting to the good and evil discussion, it's like, I don't think that that's possible. I don't, when I look at, people say, oh, but look at all the crimes and things that people commit. And yes, and I go, and did you look at the rest of the pie chart where you have 95% of people not committing crimes and not doing this and not doing that? It's the other side of the equation that most people miss because they have this predisposition to look at everybody as sinful and wicked. So yeah, I just expect things to go from bad to worse. And the mentality of some of the theists that come to this channel is, yeah, things are just getting worse. They're getting more terrible. And it's like, no, when you really look at statistics, they're not getting worse. They're getting better. Oh man. Okay. I don't think sin is a rational evaluation of humanity. Sorry, sin is something that is defined by the Bible as a disobedience to the command of God. The problem with the commands of God is they're arbitrary and capricious. And the way sin is defined, like particularly for Jesus defines anger and lust as sin. Okay, well then no human being can escape that. That's really cool if you want everybody be into the same boat, and then sell your snake oil to everybody. If you make everybody a customer, as somebody has worked in retail 15 years now, and plus been a pastor for 20 years selling this stuff. If you're going to sell the snake oil, you want to make a biggest customer base as possible. That's why snake oil salesmen of the past used to list all these ailments, because sooner or later they're going to hit everybody. Okay, and the same is true for sin. Sin is not a logical thing. It's a made up thing that's designed to hit everybody on an emotional level. There's nothing rational about it. Okay. Humanity does a lot of good that goes unnoticed because our evolutionary trait is to notice what is wrong, not what is right. Okay. And because we want to avoid stuff that could damage us. And so we notice that more than when all the good stuff is going on. Okay. It's not our ideal, though, Stephen. It's God's ideal. And God, as far as I can tell, is made up. He's mythological. Okay. It's not about social existence. Okay. If that's true, then we need to bring back certain things in the Bible because they obviously were socially benefiting according to God. And that would include slavery, for instance. Okay. I'm sorry. No. Okay. I think we have developed a better morality as human beings, and we have moved on from this, early Iron Age bullshit. Okay, of sin and all this stuff. Okay, I'm past it. Okay, because the one thing I realized about sin is if you go away from the Bible, and without the Bible, without, as Paul eloquently says, without the law, if the law didn't exist, there would be no sin. Okay, for the atheist, the law of God doesn't exist, so there is no sin. You have to prove that that exists, and to do that, you have to prove that God exists. So it all comes back to the existence of God and proving his existence. If God doesn't exist, there are no commands that God gives, and there's no sin. Okay. Okay. One thing I think I need to explain at this point. I believe that religions do what I would call fit into society that they belong to. Evil is not a matter of opinion, sir. Okay. That's a trope, and that's not very thinking very deeply about it. And not only that, what is evil is a good question. Even for you as a theist, what is evil? What does that mean? What is good and what is evil? Well, the Bible assumes it taps into your normal, natural understanding of what good and evil is. But what is good and evil is a good question. Um, uh, I don't never disappoint God, but I also, because he doesn't exist. But to me, I just don't find the biblical God convincing as to his existence, let alone anything else. But evil and good are not a matter of opinion. They're a matter of societal development. Okay. It's not just about my opinion. The one thing you guys miss with that criticism is that there's a collective social opinion about what is good and what is evil. And those things, no, it's not necessarily about what the powerful say it is. It's also about what society says it is. There's a lot of social things that have nothing to do with the people in power. They just are because human beings exist. Okay. But if you're going to claim that it's all about might makes right at that point, well, so is divine command theory. It is absolutely about God being the might that makes right. Okay. You have to take the side that something is right because God says it so. Okay. And so that's might makes right. Okay. I don't influence. I think power isn't the only issue. It's also influence, which I suppose is a form of power. There's always rebel elements to a society that don't follow the rules. Okay. They don't listen to the people in power. And so how does that work for them? I mean, it's more complicated than that. It's much more complicated than that. So for my, this is the thing, the theist always makes a lot of claims about morality and what good and evil is and power and opinion and all that stuff, but it's not, Do you have evidence for that? And I don't think all people in society are evil. I think what we consider evil is probably an anomaly, not the rule. Most people are just living their life and trying to do the best they can. And I don't know. I think I think it was Penn said it. The problem with human society is everybody thinks that things are getting worse when they're actually getting better. But we always have to have something to bitch about. So we always come up with things to bitch about. Um, you know, uh, I don't know what they think is right. I don't. I think people in society want to live longer. They want to be more proud. What's wrong with that? If the statement that just look at society, what thinks is right, and you're automatically assuming that they think what is right is evil. That's not true. Society wants better things. Society wants, better education. They want better stuff. Okay, it's not. They absolutely have a moral compass. That's your problem. Your indoctrination doesn't allow you to see that people have a moral compass. Okay, they have their own moral compass. Society has its own moral compass. Okay, but indoctrination tells you that the only way to have a moral compass is to have a God. Well, yeah, you're going to believe that until somebody shows you that that's not necessary, and it's not. Okay, you have to. I mean, if you're going to say that God is the one who gives morality, the first question I have is which one, because mankind's created so many. And then wouldn't that make morality subjective to that God and make it very arbitrary and capricious? Wouldn't it make it might makes right then? Okay, you're basically saying might makes right because God makes the rules. And then you're going to sit there and tell me I'm a might makes right person? Well, so are you. Okay, it's like it's all a question of which might you think makes right at that point. But I don't think that that's the way humanity works. Humanity is much more complicated than that. I think my Christianity and my religion made me look at humanity far too simplistically, and that's because human beings are very, very diverse. Um, the more you look at the diversity of humanity on planet Earth, it becomes a real challenge to say anything definitive sometimes. Um, yeah, Paul, I don't know. See, this is the thing about morality, isn't it? Because the fact that we're having all this debate and argument in the comments kind of indicates all the subjectivity of human morality, doesn't it? It's just there, and we keep coming to these same arguments and the same trying to find the same conclusions. But I don't see humanity as evil or sinful anymore. I actually think that most of us are trying for something better for ourselves and for the people we love and care for, to make a better society. We just disagree as to how that is. I think that was a line that I found particularly powerful in the Fallout series, when the young Brotherhood of Steel knight says that. He says, everybody wants to make a better world. We just disagree on how to get there. And man, I, boy, is that so true. Okay. And some of us think we need God. Others of us think we don't. And that just, it's not a question of, that's just an observation of reality. Human beings all have, I think most of us have very good desires, natural good desires, I guess. It's just we really disagree on how to get there. And that's the real moral question. How do we get there where everybody, with more people benefit and less people are disadvantaged? I don't know. Yeah, it continues to be a debated point. And until Christians or whoever proves their God exists, I think we have to go with the assumption that morality is something human made. And we're going to have to go forward with that. Uh, the problem is, I think when we look at moral conscience, we're starting to come to a very scientific understanding of where that comes from. And God isn't necessary for it. Okay. Paul also argued that everybody was a sinner. So he had a very negative view of humanity out the gate. And so on the one hand, he sits there and says moral conscience comes from God, but then turns around and says we're all sinners. So did the moral conscience that comes from God make us all sinners? Okay, and then of course somebody will bring in the free will defense, and then I'll point to biblical passages where, like this week, where God hardens some guy's heart so he can't make a good decision. Okay, what do you got then? It's like the God of the Bible and Paul's own theology changes with time, and the reason it changes is I don't think the last 6 books chronologically attributed to him are his. Okay, I think the theology changes because somebody else is writing in his name, and Paul was very much a Jesus is going to come before the end of the first century guy, and when that didn't pan out, people wrote in his name to kind of correct that problem, to kind of save Christianity. So, if I'm a firm believer, if Constantine hadn't picked Christianity and picked something else, we'd be arguing about that instead, and there would be no Christianity as big as it is. Let's see. I'm trying to make sure I get. I think that's it for comments. I think we've had the probably typical discussion of God and morality and all the stuff that deals with. I'm very interested in, as I go through this series I'm going to do, I'm going to be exploring divine command theory probably for a couple episodes to start out, and why I reject it. That'll be the first thing. That's the thing I had to really come to grips with first, is why I didn't need a God. But at the same time, I'm looking ahead to some of these other theories that don't require a God and their view about, how morality is achieved. Morality is now a very complicated question for me. It used to be so simple and simplistic, I guess would be a better word, but not anymore. The thing of guys in the comments, I know some of you are frustrated with Christian, but I've been where he's at. I know people can change. And I don't have any hatred for Christians in my heart at all. I have a large hatred for people who use religion as a cudgel, okay, to try to make other people behave and control them. It's probably one of the things, because I got a comment, why are you so emotional and hatred about something you don't think exists? And it's like, I'm not angry at that which I don't think exists. Okay. I'm angry at what people do with it. Okay. I'm angry with people thinking that the Bible is this perfect book and then using this perfect sword of theirs to cut people down. That's not my issue. My issue is empathy towards the Christian and all that. And I understand that when people say, like Christian just said, I'm praying for you, that's his best statement of empathy. I think a lot of you atheists assume that some of these people are completely belligerent, and they're not. Okay, some of them are. I've dealt with them where they're just one ad hominem attack after another, attacking me personally. And that I did. But once I studied the Bible more and got into the Bible more and analyzed its claims and realized that, like, once I got to the painful conclusion that the first 5 books of the Bible had absolutely no historical backing whatsoever, well, that kind of blows a lot of things out of the water, because Jesus sure thought they were historical. And if he was in error about that, and slowly sin wasn't real because it just doesn't exist because it's made up, and God's a made up thing. And my God was no better than Zeus or Odin or all the rest of them. It's just as Yahweh is just as made up as those guys. And, even in the Old Testament, Yahweh isn't the only God. Okay. He even admits so in the 10 Commandments. So I just, study of the Bible is what led me away from this. Okay. It wasn't an emotional experience. In fact, I was a pretty good emotional state when I left Christianity. I was pretty calm. My church wasn't terrible. Yeah, that's what the Bible says. And that's your problem. You have a lot of the Bible says, Christian James, but do you have reality says to back that up? Okay, that's the question. That's the question. Okay, it's a cool story. Don't get me wrong. Sometimes, and mythology is very cool, but once you realize that the Bible is just as mythological as all the writings of Hinduism, of all the writings of the pagans, once you realize it's all stuff that human beings made up, just like all the rest of them, it changes you forever. And that's what did it. Studying the Bible made me realize it's mythology for the most part, and legendary mythology. I think Jesus uh, probably suffered the same effects as every tall tale from Johnny Appleseed to Paul Bunyan to, the steel driving man. It's like, you take a story and you keep embellishing it and you finally write it down decades later, it's going to be not what it was. So there you go. That's kind of where I'm at with it. I don't know. Any questions in the chat for me? I'm looking for, I always watch these things for video ideas, so you're more than welcome to put video ideas in the comments. I try to get there. Just some announcements. I am heading to like 3 videos a week. Reaction video on Monday. Deconverters Bible study will be released to the members as soon as it's finished. And then on Wednesday at 6, it'll drop. That will not be premiered. I'm trying to cut premieres down a little bit so I have more time to work on other things. Do I have any loot? No. No. Thank you for the humor, though. I appreciate that. And then Friday, of course, is the Morality Without God series, although you may see different titles. I'm not always going to preface it with Morality Without God. I'm going to try to stay on subject. And then we'll continue with that. And then live streaming here every Saturday at 6. That'll kind of wrap the week up. It's been a good week. As of today, I think I am 16 subscribers away from 5K. So maybe next week will be a 5K celebration of some sort. I'm not really sure. I'm not, as a non-social autistic person, I'm not really very good at partying. So it's always been my downfall. I would not survive in certain societies where partying is necessary to rise up the ranks. That's just not me. So there's that element of it. I'm looking forward to that. I want to think membership has grown as well. The channel is growing pretty much on all fronts and a little bit faster this week than previous weeks. There was a couple weeks there where it got pretty low and I actually lost a couple subscribers a couple of days. But then things have gone forward since. So I'm very happy with that. I appreciate that. So things are looking up for all of you that have recently subscribed. Thank you. It's okay. To Bren, yeah, I've told you, sir, worry about being a student and getting where you need to be, right? Okay. To all of you, don't give to this channel unless you can afford it. I am so past the faith preaching thing that I actually have, I react oppositely to the react. Make sure you're taking care of yourself first. The traveling patriarchal narratives, I can tell you what my answer is right now, if you want, Rimmers. I can tell you that I don't think it happened. Okay. I think it's mythology because there's absolutely no evidence for anything in the first 5 books of the Bible. I think, is it believable in the sense that people traveled around at that time period and something like that could have happened in the imagination of people? Sure. I don't think Abraham exists, though. I don't think Isaac existed, at least not in the way the story is portrayed. Jacob, all the rest of it. the Jews needed a origin mythology to sell to the Babylonians and the Persians as to why they should be allowed to go back to Palestine and take over. Um, that's what they needed. And when I look at the Old Testament, it's very much a political document. And I think the wanderings of the patriarchs, that thing. I mean, I could go in depth on that. I really could, because the stories in Genesis are hilarious when you really think about it. Um, I think I love the one story where, what is it? The one sister of all those guys gets raped, basically gets sexually assaulted. And so they ask, well, that's okay. Just all of you get circumcised. And then while they're laying there moaning around, they kill them all. I thought that was brilliant on their part. Um, you know, but there's a lot of stuff I could stay at the story. Yeah. The thing about life expectancy in the Bible, I think they're stretched because even, you look at the ancient mind and remember what they have is this idea is the past was better. People lived longer, things were more civilized. Not really much has changed, right? Um, and so I think they stretched out the longevity and they stretched out those things. A lot of that is the problems that we've had with Hebrew and studying Hebrew numbers. So that's been one of the scholarly pursuits. Um, so there's that, and then traveling on foot. I don't think when you're looking at Palestine, we're talking 120 miles. I have hiked. A good hiker can do 30 miles a day. I don't know what that is in kilometers. In the United States, we're still using the Royal system, which is kind of ironic. Um, but yeah, I I think you traveling by foot is possible. It's just, would people been accepted if they weren't from around there? Is a good question. Tribalism being what it is, but um, so yeah, I mean, I could do a lot of stuff with the patriarchs. I think some of the situations they get into are hilarious. Um, yeah, I mean, he did. I mean, he gets the idea is he came out of Ur of the Chaldees, and I think that's actually a political move too. Remember, considering when it was notice that they're trying to appease the Babylonians and the Persians. Where does Abraham come from? Babylon and Persia. Okay, they want to say that, when I look at the myth building of this, it's very interesting what they choose and why they choose it. Why is Egypt the bad guy? Because to the Babylonians and the Persians, Egypt was the bad guy. Okay, yeah, they borrowed the story. They definitely weaved in like Babylonian law, Code of Hammurabi stuff. All that stuff is stolen straight up, and they did that for a political reason. Okay, they did that because what they wanted was to really connect to their captors, so they could convince their captors that this is what they wanted. Okay, so that's kind of the motif, I think, when you look at the Abrahamic story. There's a lot of different views on it, and the scholarly research is kind of indicating that the people who wrote the Old Testament very much had an agenda, and that agenda was political. Okay, and so they connected their law, their mythology, their origin stories to Babylon and Persia. Okay, and that whole culture, they did that on purpose. And when you really look at it, that's kind of, that's why to me now it's complete mythology. I think they made so much stuff up because they were trying to ingratiate themselves to their captors. And that way they could convince them, hey, we want to go back to Palestine and settle there. That's our home country. Give it to us. So there's that aspect of it. And so, yes, yeah, Abraham, Jacob, Isaac. I actually find the character of Isaac very intriguing because he has the least said about him. Okay, he just it, there's like, finding him a wife is a big deal, and he blesses Jacob ahead of Esau, and that's his significance in the story. And but so they ended up doing all kinds of things. There is this thought that, I mean, when you look at Abraham, he has tons of wives and has tons of kids. Okay, but the story all centers around the uniqueness of Isaac, that he's the one kid of promise. And he's the one that's connected the most to the mythologies of the Babylons and Persians and all that stuff. And when you really look at it, it's a very cunning work of political propaganda as well as good myth telling. Um, they're definitely being very pragmatic. I do find that part of what I now can look at very interesting to me in biblical studies. It's a lot like a lot of other myths. There's practical reasons why mythology is told. Okay. Um, like, I know Norse mythology pretty well, and I can see the connection between the nature of the Norse people and their mythology, why their myths go a certain direction. The same is true for these Abrahamic religions. There's a natural progression to it. Yeah, the thing is, remember, the reason why the JEPD theory exists is it looks like there's this. Well, yeah, remember, I have Swedish ancestries too. I have Norwegian, Swedish, and Danish ancestry. Is about a quarter of my ancestry genetically. So, um, definitely connections. Definitely want to visit sometime whenever I get the chance. But when you look at the mythology that they borrow from and they take from, these Semitic peoples aren't doing anything different than anybody else. It's just these Hebrews wanted to ingratiate themselves to the power brokers so they could get the land. And, it's that, yeah, a lot of my necklaces are Norse. I got Fenrir on today, but it's because of my heritage. It's the one part of my heritage that's actually kind of a mystery because it's my biological grandfather, and I know very little about him other than his ancestry, which is Norse, pretty much Scandinavian. So, um, and I give that nod to that. I find the Norse mythology far more interesting than Yahweh. I think Yahweh is typically tribal. He is definitely one God among many. All the tribes had their God and usually a consort goddess, and they were all fighting with each other to decide which god was the biggest, you know. And that's kind of where that all comes from. And when they get it in captivity in Babylon and Persia, they're trying to ingratiate themselves. So um, they just kind of, yeah, yeah, that is a funny story. The resurrection god Norse is a pig. I find that hilarious. Uh, Direct contrast to anything that Jewish people would want, definitely. Um, so, but it's once you start studying mythology, you can't. There's certain themes that come up in humanity and religion that are there all the time, and Yahweh God is no different than any other myth, and that's a death nail to a lot of people's faith once you come to that realization, because when you've been indoctrinated as a child, or you have this emotional experience that causes you to start believing a faith. It's very easy for people to pour stuff into you and say, this is true, this is true, this is historically true. But when you really study it, uh, it's gone. It's like, yeah, it's no different than anything. um, I That is the thing about deconverting, as so I've seen behind the curtain and I can't go back. A lot of theists come here trying to reconvert me, and it's like, how do I unsee what I have seen? How do I go back and suddenly realize that the first 5 books of the Bible are not mythology, because I would have to believe that in order to believe some of the words of Jesus, because Jesus treats the Old Testament as if it's history. He absolutely does that. And if it's not history, if it's pure mythology, then Jesus is mistaken and he's not the Son of God. The resurrection doesn't really prove he's the Son of God. I've made that statement before. There were a whole bunch of people who rise from the dead when he was crucified to testify in Jerusalem. Does that make them the Son of God too? Or when Jesus raises people from the dead, does that make them the sons of God too, or daughters of God? You know, resurrections seem to be quite common actually in the story. So, and really, Paul was looking for the resurrection of everybody. So he didn't really think that proved Jesus was the Christ. And when he says you have to believe in the resurrection in Romans 10, what resurrection he is talking about is a debatable point, even among Christians. So, um, you know, I don't know. I've gotten to the point where I read anything in the Bible and it's like, okay, what nonsense are they trying to promote now? Because I think Christianity owes its existence more to Paul than the apostles. So, it's like his ability to convince people and set up churches was probably his greatest claim to fame to Christianity. Uh, Here's the funny part. I've met some Jewish people who don't believe in God, but they follow the culture because that's their cultural heritage. I had a professor like that. He was Jewish, and he did all the traditions. But when I asked him, "You actually believe in all that?" And he's like, "No, I don't even really believe in God." He says, "But it's part of my family tradition. It's my ancestry. I mean, I guess wearing the little cap for him is kind of like me wearing my necklace. It's kind of that way." I Felice, I agree with you now. I don't think I want to trust in Jesus. Jesus used to be my hero, and now he's kind of like, I don't know. Some of his teachings to me are kind of whack. Um, it's like, no, I don't see the logic behind that. I don't see the rationality behind that. It's why I hold the theory that if Jesus did exist, I think he was more like a cult leader in Christianity. So I think, it's, that's more, I just don't have it in me. I don't know how to go back. I don't know, once you see behind the religious curtain, behind the Christian religious curtain, and see that there's a man at the controls or human beings at the controls, and there is no great and powerful Oz, uh, there's just no way to go back. Okay, you can't go back to the fear. Um, so, all right, but yeah, I mean, so yeah, I'm at that point, and I think this moral discussion that's come up, um, it it's a personal journey for me. That's why I put it that way in the intro video, because I think by exploring the subjectivity of morality and mythology and connections to it, you just can't go back. You can't unsee what you've seen. And I just don't trust Jesus. I think he's as mythological as Hercules sometimes. Maybe there was a real guy named Hercules that was really strong, but the embellishment has gotten bigger with the passage of time. And I think the same was true for Jesus. I think Jesus may have been a rabbi, but he just was one among many, and people put some mythology to his story to add weight to it. I think he was pretty much unremarkable, other than maybe there is one hint at the truth of his remarkableness, and that's at the end of the Sermon on the Mount, where the writer makes now, and they were in awe, not because um, he was speaking anything different, but that he spoke with authority and not as a stripe. In other words, well, all the preachers that I have ever heard where people sing their praises, it's because they speak with such authority and power and confidence. And maybe that was Jesus. Um, maybe that was Jesus. That he just spoke with a lot of authority and power compared to the people around him, and people. There might have been a natural charisma to him that made his story bigger. Um, yeah, I don't know. The thing about the world, I think even thinking negatively about human existence is kind of a religious thing. I guess I was thinking about this Friday when I was holding my grandson. I'm thinking, yeah, there's a lot of crap in the world. There's also a lot of good stuff. There's a lot of good things. Um, there's a lot of stuff that's just very human, that's very good too. And getting rid of that idea of good and evil in human experience, it's just opened up my mind to a lot of things. Yeah, yeah, I think when I look at preachers as somebody who used to be a former preacher, it's interesting how people when I'm shaking everybody's hand as they're leaving, the sermons that I didn't, I don't think he loves me. I don't think if Jesus existed, I don't think he cares two whits about me. He died before he could do so. We're not in the same time period. uh, so there's that. But at the same time, I just look at that part of my life. But preachers, look at the ones that everybody reveres. Look at the big TV preachers. Why do people watch these people? It's not because they're rational. It's not because they have high sophisticated reasoning. A lot of it is either they dress in a suit and tie and they look professional and sharp, and a lot of the Reformed Baptist kind of viewpoint, they have that old time deep whatever, or they're very charismatic and they say all kinds of things that just grip people. I think Jesus, if he existed, that's what he was. He was a guy that got a hold of people. And there was something about him, exactly, Rimmers. There was something about Jesus that everybody wanted to be. Um, okay, so yeah, I mean, and I think if he existed, that's the kind of person he was. He was either very sincere nut job, because what is it? C.S. Lewis gives us that he's either a liar, lunatic, or Lord. I think he's probably if he existed, he was either a lunatic, a liar, or a very sincerely misled person, which maybe that's a lunatic. I don't know. Um, so yeah, okay. Well, it's been about an hour and a half, and I don't want to go any too much longer than that. This has been a great discussion, guys. I appreciate everybody who came out tonight. The streaming stuff I'm still getting used to, so stick with me. But you guys have offered up some really good comments. I may eventually get to the point where I learn enough about this, where I have a co-host and we can field things together. I know a couple other pastors are now banding with other pastors to do shows like this. So that might be something in my future. So I'm going to have to call it quits. I've got a few other things I need to do. And as an autistic person, my social anxiety has reached a certain level. Um, yeah, Felicity, I would love to have you as a co-host. Once I get to that point where I feel comfortable enough doing this by myself, I'll be rare. But I want to thank everybody for stopping by. It's just been great. Very close to 5K. So get out there and kind of help me share the stuff. Promote the channel as much as you can. We're getting very, very close. And I appreciate all of you are responsible for that. Thank you, guys. I appreciate all. And as always, live your best life. You only get one go around and then it's over. And so you want to take all that time and money and opportunities and give it to yourself, to the people you love and care for, and to make this a better world. You'll be happier if you do. And don't waste it on the trappings of religion and faith. That's a dead end. I speak from experience. And as always, thanks for stopping by. And I'll catch you all next time.